Everyone laughed at the single-dad janitor until the CEO read his file and stood up, and in one shocking moment, the man everyone mocked was revealed to be the one person in the entire building they should have never messed with. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sam Bishop pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridor of Harrington Industries. At this hour, the building felt like a different world, quiet except for the soft squeak of his cart's wheels and the gentle swoosh of his movements. He checked his watch, 9 p.m., the start of another long night shift. Sam pulled out his cleaning supplies, methodically arranging them as he'd done countless times before. The routine was familiar, almost comforting. He started with the executive offices on the top floor, dusting the expensive wooden desks and emptying waste bins with careful precision. As he worked, his thoughts drifted to Ellie, hopefully sleeping peacefully under Mrs. Jensen's watchful eye. The elderly neighbor had been a blessing, stepping in to watch Ellie during his night shifts, but Sam worried about relying on her too much. Her arthritis was getting worse, and he could see the fatigue in her eyes more often these days. Moving to the break room, Sam heard voices and laughter coming from around the corner. A few employees were working late, probably trying to meet a deadline. He continued his work quietly, not wanting to disturb them. "Hey, look who it is! The mop guy!" The mocking voice belonged to Caleb, one of the younger employees from marketing. Sam kept his head down, pretending not to hear as he wiped down the counters. He could see their reflections in the break room window, 3 of them, gathered around with coffee cups in hand. "I bet that's all he knows how to do," Morgan chimed in with a smirk. "Push a mop around." "Probably couldn't handle real work if he tried," Vince added, loud enough to make sure Sam could hear. "I mean, look at him. This is probably the highlight of his career." Their laughter echoed through the empty space. Sam's hands trembled slightly as he continued cleaning, but he kept his movement steady. He'd learned long ago that responding only made things worse. Instead, he thought about Anna. She would have known exactly what to say to put these young men in their place. She'd always been better with words. A sad smile crossed his face as he remembered her fierce spirit, how she'd stand up to anyone who tried to put others down. "I promise," he'd told her in those final days at the hospital, holding her hand as she grew weaker. "I'll give Ellie the stability she needs, no matter what it takes." The memory of that promise steadied him now, as it had so many times before. He finished cleaning the break room, refusing to let their words speed up his careful work. The young men eventually tired of their game and left, their footsteps fading down the hallway. Sam moved through the building floor by floor, his movements efficient and thorough. He cleaned fingerprints from glass doors, vacuumed carpets, and sanitized bathrooms. Each task was done with quiet dignity, despite the earlier mockery still ringing in his ears. In the quiet hours, he thought about Ellie's upcoming science fair project. She'd been so excited about her experiment with plant growth, and he'd promised to help her set it up this weekend. The thought brought a genuine smile to his face. No matter how others saw him, in Ellie's eyes, he was still her hero. The night wore on, marked by the steady progression of his cleaning routine. He worked his way down through the building, floor by floor, until finally reaching the ground level. The last task was always mopping the main hallway, making sure it would shine for the morning arrivals. As he worked the mop across the floor in long, practiced strokes, Sam caught his reflection in the polished marble walls. He saw what others saw, a middle-aged man in a janitor's uniform, slightly stooped from years of physical work. But he also saw what Anna would have seen, a father keeping his promise, doing whatever it took to provide for their daughter. The clock struck 1 a.m. as Sam put away the last of his cleaning supplies. He wheeled the cart back to the storage closet, making sure everything was properly organized for tomorrow night. His muscles ached from the hours of work, but there was satisfaction in knowing he'd done his job well. He stepped outside into the cold night air, the sudden change in temperature making him shiver. The parking lot was nearly empty now, just a few cars belonging to the other night shift workers. Above, the stars were barely visible through the city's light pollution, but Sam paused to look up anyway, taking a moment to breathe deeply. His shoulders felt heavy as he thought about the night's events, about the casual cruelty of those young employees who saw him as nothing more than the mop guy. But then he thought of Ellie, waiting at home, and his steps became more purposeful. He had to relieve Mrs. Jensen, who would certainly be tired after watching Ellie all evening. Sam walked to his old sedan, each step carrying the weight of his exhaustion, but also his determination. The mockery, the long hours, the physical strain. None of it mattered compared to keeping his promise to Anna and giving Ellie the stable life she deserved. He unlocked his car door, the familiar creak of hinges breaking the night silence. Before getting in, he took one last look at the building where he'd spend so many nights. The windows were dark now, but tomorrow they'd be bright again, and he'd return to do it all over again. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. For Ellie, for the promise he made, and for the dignity that came from doing honest work, regardless of what others might say. Sam's alarm pierced the early morning silence at 6:30 a.m. His body ached from last night's work, but he pushed himself up, knowing Ellie needed to get ready for school. The coffee maker gurgled in their small kitchen as he shuffled through their modest apartment, its familiar scent offering some comfort after just a few hours of sleep. "Ellie, sweetheart," he called softly, knocking on her door. "Time to wake up." He heard rustling from behind the door, followed by a sleepy, "Coming, Dad." While Ellie got dressed, Sam prepared a simple breakfast of toast and scrambled eggs. Their kitchen was small but tidy, with crayon drawings decorating the refrigerator and a few potted plants on the windowsill, attempts to bring some life into their third-floor apartment. Ellie emerged from her room, her dark hair slightly tangled, wearing her favorite purple sweater. She climbed onto one of the mismatched kitchen chairs, stifling a yawn. "Did you sleep okay?" Sam asked, placing a plate in front of her. "Hmm?" She picked up her fork, then suddenly brightened. "Oh, Dad, I almost forgot. We're having an art show at school this week, on Thursday evening. Miss Peterson said my painting might be featured." Sam paused while pouring his coffee. Thursday evening, right in the middle of his shift, he turned to see Ellie's hopeful expression and felt his heart squeeze. "That's wonderful about your painting, sweetheart. I'll try my best to make it." "Really?" Her face lit up. "Mrs. Jensen said she could take me, but I really want you to see it." "I'll try," he repeated, hating the uncertainty in his voice. "Now finish up your breakfast, or we'll be late." The morning routine continued as usual, brushing teeth, gathering school supplies, making sure Ellie's lunch was packed. Sam's movements were mechanical, his mind already working through the evening's logistics. After dropping Ellie at school, his phone buzzed. Mrs. Jensen's name appeared on the screen, and something in his stomach tightened. He pulled over to read the message. "Sam, I hate to do this to you, but my arthritis has gotten much worse. The doctor says I need to rest more. I won't be able to watch Ellie in the evenings anymore. I'm so sorry." Sam's hands trembled as he typed a gracious reply, thanking her for all she'd done. But as soon as he hit send, panic set in. Mrs. Jensen had been his only reliable childcare option since moving to this area. His mind raced through possibilities as he drove home. Throughout the day, between short bursts of sleep, Sam called everyone he could think of. He tried the parents of Ellie's classmates, but none could commit to regular evening care. He called distant relatives, but they all lived too far away. He even looked into after-school programs, but none ran late enough to cover his shift hours. The afternoon slipped away far too quickly. Sam sat on the edge of his bed, his phone showing a long list of failed calls. His shift would start in less than an hour, and he still had no solution. The thought of missing work wasn't an option. They needed every penny of his paycheck to keep their heads above water. With growing dread, he realized he only had one choice. He couldn't leave Ellie alone at home. She was too young, and it wasn't safe. But he couldn't miss work either. The solution felt terrible, but it was the only way. Sam drove to Ellie's school, his stomach in knots. When she bounded down the steps, her backpack bouncing, he forced a smile. "Hey, sweetie. We need to make a quick stop before heading to the convenience store for dinner." "Are we getting those sandwiches I like?" she asked, buckling her seatbelt. "Sure are." He tried to keep his voice light. "But listen, Ellie, there's been a change of plans. Mrs. Jensen isn't feeling well, so you'll need to come with me to work tonight." Ellie's eyes widened. "Really? I get to see where you work?" Sam's throat tightened at her excitement. "Yes, but it's very important that you stay quiet and do exactly what I say. You'll need to bring some books and homework to keep yourself busy. Can you do that for me?" She nodded solemnly. "I promise, Dad." They stopped at the convenience store, where Sam bought sandwiches, juice boxes, and some snacks. He also grabbed a few coloring books and colored pencils, anything to keep Ellie occupied during the long night ahead. As they approached Harrington Industries, the setting sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. Sam parked in his usual spot, far from the main entrance. He helped Ellie gather her things, her backpack, the bag of supplies, and her dinner. "Remember what I said about being quiet?" he whispered as they walked toward the service entrance. "We need to be like ninjas, okay?" Ellie giggled softly and mimicked tiptoeing. Sam's heart ached with love for her, even as guilt gnawed at him for bringing her here. He knew it wasn't ideal, far from it, but he had no other choice. They slipped into the building just as dusk was settling, and Sam prayed they wouldn't run into anyone who might question why the night janitor had brought his daughter to work. Sam guided Ellie through the quiet hallways of Harrington Industries, her small hand clutching his work-worn fingers. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed softly as their footsteps echoed against the polished floors. Most employees were packing up for the day, their chatter fading as they headed toward the exits. "Here we go, sweetie," Sam said, leading Ellie into the break room. He pulled out a chair at a corner table, positioning it so she could see out the large windows where the setting sun painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks. "I brought your favorite coloring books and some snacks." Ellie's face lit up as she pulled her backpack onto the table. "Can I make you something while you work, Daddy?" She dug through her bag, retrieving a fresh pack of crayons and her treasured art supplies. "That would be wonderful." Sam's eyes crinkled with genuine warmth as he watched her arrange her materials with careful precision. "Just stay right here, okay? I'll check on you every 15 minutes. The break room door swung open, and Sam's shoulders tensed as three familiar voices filled the space. Caleb, Morgan, and Vince swaggered in, their designer shoes squeaking against the freshly mopped floor. Their conversation halted when they spotted Sam and Ellie. "Well, well," Caleb drawled, exchanging knowing looks with his companions. "Bringing the family to work now?" Sam stepped protectively closer to Ellie's table. "I'm just getting started with my shift." His voice remained steady, professional. Morgan snickered, elbowing Vince. "Guess the janitor couldn't afford a babysitter." Ellie's crayon paused mid-stroke, her small fingers tightening around it as she glanced between her father and the three men. The confusion in her eyes made Sam's heart ache. Vince approached the coffee machine, purposefully filling his cup to the brim. With exaggerated movements, he turned and let the hot liquid splash across the counter. "Oops!" he announced loudly, dark coffee dripping onto the floor. "Better clean that up, janitor." Their laughter bounced off the walls, sharp and cruel. Sam reached for his cleaning supplies, his movements mechanical, practiced. He'd cleaned up their intentional messes before, but never with Ellie watching. "Daddy?" Ellie's whisper cut through the mockery like a knife. She tugged gently at his sleeve, her young face twisted with concern. "Why do they laugh at you, Daddy? You work harder than them." The innocence of her question struck Sam like a physical blow. His forced smile felt brittle on his face as he met her worried gaze. The truth in her words, so simple, so pure, made his chest tight. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. In the hallway outside, Grace Harrington had been making her final rounds before heading home. The CEO's measured steps slowed as the sounds from the break room reached her ears. She paused, her hand resting on the wall, listening to the exchange with growing concern. The three young employees continued their performance, making snide remarks about the help as Sam silently began cleaning up the spilled coffee. Ellie watched, her artwork forgotten, small fingers wringing together in distress. "Hey, mop guy," Morgan called out. "Maybe you should bring your kid more often. She can learn the family business early." More laughter. Sam's movements remained steady, but his jaw clenched tight. He focused on the task, trying to shut out their voices, trying not to see the hurt and confusion on his daughter's face. "Actually," Caleb added, leaning against the counter Sam was cleaning, "this is probably good career guidance for her. Got to keep those janitorial skills in the family, right?" Vince high-fived Caleb, their expensive watches glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Maybe we should spill something else, give them both some practice." Grace Harrington stood in the doorway, taking in the scene before her. Her presence, though quiet, filled the room with immediate gravity. She observed Sam's dignified silence, Ellie's protective gaze fixed on her father, and the three young men who suddenly found their shoes very interesting. The CEO's measured footsteps drew everyone's attention as she moved purposefully into the break room. Her silver hair was neatly styled, her suit crisp despite the late hour. She stopped beside Ellie's table, her kind eyes taking in the scattered crayons and half-finished drawing. "Hello there," Grace said warmly, pulling out a chair next to Ellie. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Grace." She extended her hand to the young girl with the same respect she'd show any adult. Ellie glanced at her father, who nodded encouragingly before shaking Grace's hand. "I'm Ellie Bishop," she replied softly. "I'm here because Mrs. Jensen's arthritis is too bad for her to watch me anymore." "Is that so?" Grace's voice remained gentle as she picked up one of Ellie's crayons, admiring the colorful drawing on the table. "You're quite the artist, Ellie. Would you tell me about what you're drawing?" As Ellie began to explain her artwork, Caleb, Morgan, and Vince shifted uncomfortably near the coffee counter. The CEO's presence had effectively silenced their mockery, but she hadn't so much as glanced in their direction. Her focus remained entirely on the young girl whose world they had just tried to diminish. Sam watched the interaction, still holding his cleaning supplies, caught between his duty to work and his desire to protect his daughter. The simple kindness in Grace's manner made his throat tight with emotion. He couldn't remember the last time anyone in the building had spoken to either of them with such genuine interest and respect. Grace leaned in closer to examine the details of Ellie's drawing, her expression brightening. "You have quite an eye for detail," she observed, pointing to a particular section of the artwork. "The way you've captured the shadows here is really something special." The room had grown quiet except for Ellie's voice as she continued sharing her artistic process with Grace. The three young men by the counter seemed to shrink with each passing moment, their earlier bravado deflating under the weight of their CEO's pointed ignorance of their presence. Sam resumed his cleaning, but now with a lighter heart, watching from the corner of his eye as his daughter's enthusiasm gradually returned under Grace's gentle encouragement. The CEO's simple act of kindness had transformed the break room's atmosphere, replacing cruelty with compassion, mockery with dignity. The corner office on the top floor of Harrington Industries stood quiet and dark, save for the warm glow of a desk lamp. Grace Harrington sat behind her large oak desk, her fingers drumming thoughtfully against its polished surface. The evening's events played over in her mind, the cruel laughter, the dignity in Sam's silence, and the pure innocence in Ellie's eyes. "First thing tomorrow morning," she had told Sam before leaving the break room, "we need to talk." He had nodded, anxiety visible in the tightening of his shoulders, but his voice remained steady. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Miss Harrington." Now, in the stillness of her office, Grace reached for her computer mouse and clicked into the company's HR database. The screen cast a blue glow across her face as she typed Samuel Bishop into the search field. Her eyes narrowed as she began to read. "Oh my," she whispered, leaning forward. The first page detailed Sam's military service record. 3 tours of duty as a combat medic, Distinguished Service Medal, Bronze Star with Valor, numerous commendations for saving lives under fire. The citations painted a picture of a man who repeatedly risked his own life to help others, who maintained composure in chaos, who led by example. Grace sat back in her chair, processing this information. The quiet janitor who endured daily mockery without complaint had once rushed into firefights to save wounded soldiers. Her hand trembled slightly as she scrolled further. The employment history section showed a steady progression of responsibility until his wife's illness. Then came a gap year, the year Anna Bishop fought and lost her battle with cancer. After that, Sam had taken the night janitor position, requesting specifically the shift that would allow him to be home when Ellie woke up for school. "Single father," Grace murmured, her throat tight, taking any work he could to be there for his daughter. She clicked through to the internal applications section and found something unexpected, a partially completed application for the company's employee advancement program. It had never been submitted. The date stamp showed it was started the day before Anna passed away. A separate file caught her attention, a scanned letter manually added to Sam's folder. The handwriting was delicate but determined, dated just weeks before Anna's death. Grace began to read. "Dear Harrington Industries, I'm writing about my husband, Sam Bishop. He won't send this letter himself. He never puts himself first. That's just who he is. It's why he was such an amazing medic, why he's such a wonderful father to our Ellie, and why I know he would be an incredible asset to your company if given the chance. Sam has so much to offer beyond his current role. His military service taught him leadership, crisis management, and dedication to duty. But it's his heart that truly sets him apart. He notices things others miss. He helps without being asked. He lifts people up without expecting recognition. I know my time is short now. My final wish is for Sam to have the opportunity to build a better life for himself and our daughter. He deserves so much more than being invisible. Please consider him for advancement within your company. I promise you won't regret it. With hope and gratitude, Anna Bishop." Grace removed her reading glasses and pressed her fingers to her eyes, fighting back tears. The letter had never been sent. She could picture Sam finding it among Anna's things, unable to bring himself to submit it, tucking it away with other precious memories of his wife. The performance reviews in his file told their own story. Exceeds expectations in every category. Perfect attendance. Countless small notes from other night staff about his helpfulness, his thorough work, his quiet kindness. Yet he remained in the same position year after year, invisible to those who could have noticed his potential. A photo in his personnel file showed Sam in his military dress uniform, standing proud and tall. The same eyes that now looked down when others mocked him had once held steady in the face of combat. The same hands that now pushed a mop had once saved countless lives. Grace opened another document, the company's current organizational chart. Her mind raced through possibilities, connecting dots, seeing opportunities that had been there all along. Sam's military leadership experience, his crisis management skills, his attention to detail, his proven ability to work under pressure, all of it wasted on cleaning up intentionally spilled coffee. She thought of Ellie, carefully arranging her crayons in the break room, defending her father's hard work with the pure honesty of a child. She thought of the 3 young employees, their casual cruelty masking their own insecurities. She thought of Anna's letter, a dying woman's plea for someone to see her husband's true worth. With gentle deliberation, Grace closed Sam's file. The room had grown darker, the city lights twinkling beyond her office windows. Her voice was barely a whisper in the quiet space. This man deserves better. She reached out and switched off the desk lamp, plunging the office into darkness, except for the gentle glow of the city beyond. The day's last act complete, but tomorrow held new possibilities. Sam stood in his small bathroom, fingers trembling as he tried to straighten his worn collar for the 5th time. The mirror showed dark circles under his eyes from another late shift, but he had polished his shoes until they gleamed and pressed his cleanest work shirt with Mrs. Jensen's borrowed iron. "Daddy, you look fine," Ellie said from the doorway, her backpack already on. She held out a paper crane. "For good luck." Sam's throat tightened as he took the delicate creation. "Thank you, sweetheart." He tucked it carefully into his breast pocket, the blue paper just visible above the edge. The drive to Ellie's school was quiet, his daughter humming softly while Sam rehearsed answers in his head to questions he couldn't even imagine. After dropping her off with a tight hug, he drove to Harrington Industries, arriving 30 minutes early. The lobby felt different in the morning light. Sam had only ever seen it at night when the marble floors reflected just the emergency lights. Now sunshine streamed through tall windows, making him feel even more out of place. Grace's assistant led him to her office, where the CEO sat behind her impressive oak desk. But instead of remaining there, she rose and gestured to a small seating area with comfortable chairs. "Please, Sam, join me." Her smile was warm as she sat across from him. "Would you like some coffee?" "No, thank you, ma'am." His voice came out barely above a whisper. Grace studied him for a moment. "Tell me about your daughter, Sam. Ellie seems like a remarkable young lady." The mention of Ellie made some of his tension ease. "She is. Smart as a whip, always making those paper cranes for people. Has a bigger heart than anyone I know." He touched the crane in his pocket. "Gets that from her mother." "I'm sorry about your wife," Grace said softly. "That must have been incredibly difficult." Sam nodded, not trusting himself to speak about Anna. "And you served as a combat medic?" Grace continued gently. "Your file shows multiple commendations for valor." "Just did what needed doing, ma'am." Sam's shoulders hunched slightly. "Same as here." "That's exactly what I wanted to discuss." Grace leaned forward. "You've been doing far more than just what needed doing. I've watched the security footage from the past month. You've stayed late countless times to help others, fixed equipment no one asked you to repair, even cleaned up accidents without reporting them so employees wouldn't get in trouble." Sam's face flushed. "It's my job to help where I can." "No, Sam. Your job is to clean. You've been doing the work of 3 people, all while being treated—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Far below the standards this company should uphold." Before Sam could respond, Grace stood. "There's going to be an all-staff meeting at 2 o'clock. I'd like you to attend." Sam's stomach clenched. "Ma'am, I don't usually—" "I know, but today is different." Her tone was kind but firm. "Trust me." The hours until 2 crawled by. Sam tried to focus on his regular duties, but his hands shook every time he thought about the meeting. When the time came, he slipped into the back of the packed auditorium, trying to make himself invisible against the wall. Grace took the stage, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Thank you all for coming. I've called this meeting because something was brought to my attention recently that requires immediate address." She paused, scanning the crowd. Sam Bishop, would you please join me? Sam felt the blood drain from his face as hundreds of heads turned to look for him. His feet seemed frozen to the floor until Grace's encouraging smile somehow got them moving. The walk to the stage felt endless. Many of you, Grace continued once Sam stood beside her, know Sam as our night janitor. Some of you, her gaze fixed briefly on Caleb, Morgan, and Vince in the third row, have chosen to know nothing more than that. Today that changes. She turned to face the crowd fully. Before joining our company, Sam Bishop served 3 tours as a combat medic. He saved 27 lives under direct fire. He received the Silver Star for carrying 2 wounded soldiers through an active combat zone after their unit was ambushed. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Sam stared at his shoes, his face burning. Since joining us, Sam has worked nights to care for his daughter after losing his wife to cancer. He's never missed a shift. He's never complained. When equipment breaks, he fixes it. When someone needs help, he helps. When others mock him, again her eyes found the 3 young men who now seemed to be trying to sink into their chairs. He responds with dignity and kindness. Grace placed a hand on Sam's shoulder. This company was founded on the principle that character matters more than titles, that actions speak louder than words. Sam Bishop embodies these principles more than anyone I've met in years. She smiled at him. Which is why I'm personally sponsoring him for our management training program, effective immediately. The auditorium erupted in gasps and whispers. Several people began to applaud, and soon the whole room joined in. Sam blinked rapidly, overwhelmed by the sound. Additionally, Grace continued once the applause died down, I'm creating a new company-wide mentorship initiative with Sam as our first participant. Everyone in this room could learn something from his example of quiet leadership and unwavering integrity. She turned to Sam fully now, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. This is only the beginning. Sam's voice shook as he whispered, Thank you. The room burst into applause again, louder this time. In the third row, Caleb, Morgan, and Vince sat completely still, their faces red with shame. Near the front, several managers were already on their feet, nodding approvingly. And at the back of the room, unnoticed by almost everyone, Sam's paper crane sat in his empty chair, its blue wings catching the afternoon light. Sam's old Toyota rumbled through the school parking lot, its familiar rattle unable to dampen his spirits. For the first time in years, his heart felt light as he waited to share the incredible news with Ellie. Through the windshield, he watched her skip down the school steps, her backpack bouncing with each step. Daddy, Ellie called out as she climbed into the car. You're early today, and you're smiling really big. Sam reached over to smooth her windblown hair. I have something special to tell you, sweetie. How about we talk about it over dinner? Is it good news? Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. The best kind. At home, Sam moved around their small kitchen with newfound energy. He hummed while boiling water for macaroni and cheese, Ellie's favorite, and heated up some canned green beans. It wasn't fancy, but tonight, it felt like a feast. Can you tell me now? Ellie asked, setting their mismatched plates on the wooden table her mother had refinished years ago. Sam stirred the macaroni, watching the cheese sauce swirl into golden ribbons. Remember Miss Grace, the nice lady from work? Ellie nodded eagerly. She liked my drawings. Well, she did something amazing today. Sam served their simple meal, sitting across from his daughter. She's giving me a chance to join a special training program at work. If I do well, I could get a better job, one where I can work during the day and be home with you at night. Ellie's fork clattered against her plate as she jumped up to hug him. No more night shifts? Really? Really. Sam held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. It might take some time, and I'll have to study hard, but things are going to get better. I can help you study, Ellie declared, returning to her seat. I'm good at flashcards. Mrs. Rodriguez says I'm the best flashcard maker in 4th grade. Sam chuckled, watching her attack her macaroni with renewed enthusiasm. That would be wonderful, sweetheart. Meanwhile, in his corner office at Harrington Industries, Daniel Ross paced behind his mahogany desk. The setting sun cast long shadows across his awards and certificates, but their prestigious glow did nothing to soothe his anger. A janitor, he muttered, loosening his expensive tie. Grace is putting a janitor in the management program. He'd spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, cultivating the right connections, maintaining the proper image. And now this disruption of the natural order. A knock at his door interrupted his brooding. Come in, he barked. Caleb, Morgan, and Vince filed in, looking nervous but eager. They jumped at his invitation for an after-hours meeting, especially after the humiliation of the afternoon's announcement. "Sit down," Daniel gestured to the leather chairs facing his desk. "I assume you understand why I called you here?" Morgan shifted uncomfortably. "It's about the janitor. I mean, Sam Bishop?" "Exactly." Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Grace's decision is concerning. It sets a dangerous precedent. Someone needs to ensure Mr. Bishop proves himself unsuitable for the program." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Vince leaned forward, interest sparking in his eyes. Daniel's voice dropped lower. "Nothing dramatic, just careful observation, documentation of any mistakes, reports of any questionable behavior." He pulled out 3 manila folders. "I've compiled some interesting details about Mr. Bishop's past, things that might raise concerns about his reliability." Caleb grabbed a folder, flipping through it eagerly. "This is good stuff, really good. Remember," Daniel cautioned, "we're not doing anything wrong. We're simply protecting company standards, making sure the right people advance." He paused meaningfully. "People like you three." The young men nodded, already imagining their own accelerated promotions. They didn't notice Daniel's calculating expression or how carefully he was avoiding putting anything in writing himself. Back in their modest apartment, Sam stood in Ellie's doorway, watching her arrange her stuffed animals for bed. She'd insisted on having them all witness her bedtime prayer tonight. "Ready for prayers?" he asked, sitting on the edge of her narrow bed. Ellie nodded solemnly, folding her hands. "Dear God," she began, "thank you for Miss Grace and for giving Daddy a chance to work in the daytime like other dads. Please help him do really good in his training. And please let us have pancakes for breakfast tomorrow." Sam chuckled softly at the last request. "Amen." He tucked the covers around her shoulders, making sure her favorite teddy bear was within reach. "I love you so much, Ellie Belly." "Love you too, Daddy," she yawned, already drifting off. "I'm proud of you." Those simple words nearly brought tears to his eyes. Sam kissed her forehead and whispered his own prayer of gratitude. "Thank you for this chance," he murmured. "Please help me make the most of it, for her sake." Standing in the hallway between their 2 small bedrooms, Sam felt hope blooming in his chest for the first time since Anna's death. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was more than he'd dared dream of yesterday. He imagined being able to attend Ellie's school events, to tuck her in every night, to build a better future for them both. The old clock in the living room chimed 9, and Sam headed to bed himself, exhausted but happy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, in their humble home, filled with love and hope, everything felt possible. He drifted off to sleep, his heart full of gratitude, unaware of the storm gathering in Daniel Ross's office. Sam adjusted his tie for the 3rd time that morning, his fingers trembling slightly as he stood in the corporate office lobby. The polished marble floors and elegant wood panels felt worlds away from the familiar utility closets and cleaning supplies he'd known for years. His old janitor's uniform had been replaced by a modest but clean navy suit he'd bought secondhand the day before. Grace Harrington's confident stride echoed through the lobby as she approached. "Good morning, Sam. Ready to begin your new chapter?" "Yes, ma'am," Sam replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Thank you again for this opportunity." Grace led him through sleek hallways to a bright conference room where 8 other trainees sat around a large table. "Everyone, this is Sam Bishop, our newest addition to the management training program." A few friendly faces offered welcoming smiles. A young woman named Sarah immediately waved him over to an empty seat beside her. Others regarded him with raised eyebrows and whispered comments behind their hands. "Today we're starting with our company's project management software," the trainer announced, passing out laptops. Sam's heart sank as he stared at the complex screen before him. The last computer he'd used regularly had been during his military service, and technology had changed dramatically since then. Sarah leaned over. "Here, let me show you where to find the menu," she whispered kindly. Sam gave her a grateful nod as she pointed out the basic functions. The morning passed in a blur of new terms and procedures. Sam's hand cramped from taking detailed notes, determined not to miss anything important. When his cursor got stuck or a window wouldn't close, he forced himself to stay calm and methodically work through the problem. At lunch break, Sam hesitated in the cafeteria doorway, his brown paper bag in hand. The other trainees had already formed their usual groups at tables, their animated chatter filling the room. Just as he considered eating alone, a warm voice called out to him. "Sam, come join me. Lydia Turner, the cafeteria supervisor, gestured to an empty chair at her small table near the kitchen. Her kind eyes and genuine smile immediately put him at ease. "Thank you," Sam said, settling into the chair. "It's been quite a morning." "I can imagine," Lydia replied, unwrapping her own sandwich. "Big changes are never easy, even good ones." Sam nodded, picking at his simple lunch. "I keep worrying I'm going to mess this up somehow. Ellie's so excited about it all, and I don't want to let her down." "Tell me about Ellie," Lydia said, her expression softening. "She seems like a special girl." A real smile crossed Sam's face for the first time that day. "She's amazing, smart, creative, always thinking of others, just like her mother was." "Was?" Lydia asked gently. Sam's eyes grew distant. "Anna passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Ellie was only 7, but she's been so strong through everything." Lydia reached across the table and briefly squeezed his hand. "You both have been strong, and you're not alone anymore, Sam. There are people here who want to help you succeed." Meanwhile, in a corner of the executive dining room, Daniel Ross was having lunch with 2 senior managers. His voice carried just the right note of concern as he spoke. "I respect Grace's charitable impulses, of course," he said, carefully cutting his steak. "But I worry about the precedent this sets. How can someone with no real business experience possibly keep up with our management training program?" The managers exchanged troubled looks. "He does seem rather out of place," one admitted. "And what message does it send to employees who've worked their way up properly?" Daniel added, letting the question hang in the air. Back in the main cafeteria, Sam checked his watch reluctantly. "I should head back. More computer training this afternoon." "You'll do fine," Lydia assured him. "Just take it one step at a time. And Sam, feel free to join me for lunch anytime." The afternoon brought more challenges, but Sam pressed on with determination. He thought of Ellie's face whenever he felt overwhelmed, reminding himself why he was there. By day's end, his head was swimming with new information, but he'd managed to complete all the basic exercises. The familiar drive home felt different somehow. Though his body ached from sitting in an office chair all day instead of moving through his usual cleaning routine, there was a spark of hope in his chest he hadn't felt in years. As he opened their apartment door, Ellie bounded over to greet him. "Daddy, how was your first day? Did you learn lots of new things? Did you make any friends?" Sam hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "It was good, sweetie. Different, but good. I met some nice people." "I made something for you." Ellie ran to her backpack and pulled out a delicate paper crane, its wings perfectly creased. "My art teacher showed us how. She said in Japan, cranes mean good luck and hope." She placed it carefully in Sam's palm. "I thought you might need some extra luck for your new job." Sam's throat tightened as he examined the precise folds, imagining Ellie's small fingers working carefully to create this gift. "It's beautiful, honey. Thank you." Later that night, after Ellie was asleep, Sam placed the paper crane on his nightstand next to the only photo he had of Anna. The crane's graceful neck seemed to bow toward the picture, as if offering a blessing. Sam touched both gently before turning out the light, grateful for the day's small victories and the daughter who believed in him so completely. Sam woke before his alarm, the pale morning light barely filtering through the threadbare curtains of his bedroom window. He sat up slowly on his narrow mattress, feeling the familiar ache in his back from the worn springs. His eyes immediately found Ellie's origami crane perched carefully on his nightstand, its delicate paper wings catching the early dawn like tiny sails. With gentle fingers, he picked it up and studied the precise folds, marveling at his daughter's careful work. He carefully tucked it into his shirt pocket, patting it once for good luck. "Ready for another day, Anna?" he whispered to the quiet room, a morning ritual that helped him feel less alone in the small apartment. He could almost hear her encouraging laugh echoing in the silence, warm and full of love. The memory of her voice still carried him through his hardest moments. The training room buzzed with nervous energy and the hum of multiple computers when Sam arrived 15 minutes early. Fluorescent lights cast everything in a sterile glow, but the atmosphere felt charged with possibility. He settled at his assigned computer workstation, the chair squeaking slightly as he adjusted the height. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he tried to remember all the shortcuts Kevin had shown him yesterday. Ctrl+C for copy, Ctrl+V for paste, F5 to refresh. The commands felt foreign on his tongue, like learning a new language. Speaking of Kevin, the young programmer was already there at a nearby desk, steaming coffee cup in hand, and dark circles under his eyes suggesting he'd been here for a while. His usual cocky demeanor seemed softer somehow, more uncertain. "Morning, Sam," Kevin said, pulling up a spare chair and rolling it over. His voice carried none of its former mockery. Instead, it held something Sam hadn't expected, genuine remorse. "Listen, I've been wanting to say something." He fidgeted with his coffee cup, turning it in slow circles on the desk. "I was a real jerk before. The way I acted, joining in with those guys, it wasn't right. I'm really sorry." Sam looked up from his computer screen, surprised by the sincerity in Kevin's voice and the way the young man couldn't quite meet his eyes. Years of being invisible had taught Sam to recognize genuine emotion, and this felt real. "Thank you, Kevin. That means a lot." "Let me make it up to you," Kevin said, his words coming faster now, as if he'd been rehearsing them. "These systems can be tricky, but I can help you learn them faster." He reached over and pointed to Sam's screen, his finger tracing the navigation menu. "Here's a shortcut that'll save you tons of time. See this toolbar? Right-click here, and you can customize it with the functions you use most." During lunch break, Sam found a quiet corner table in the cafeteria and opened his familiar brown paper bag. Alongside his simple sandwich and apple, he found a folded note in Ellie's careful handwriting. "You're the bravest dad ever. Love you lots." The words were decorated with tiny hearts and smiley faces drawn in purple crayon. He smiled, feeling warmth spread through his chest like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Someone's got a secret admirer," Lydia teased, settling into the plastic chair across from him with her own lunch tray. Her kind eyes crinkled at the corners, and she wore the same gentle smile that had welcomed him on his first day. The cafeteria around them hummed with conversation and the clatter of trays. "Just my personal cheerleader," Sam replied, showing her Ellie's note with obvious pride. The paper was slightly creased from being folded so carefully. "That girl of yours has a beautiful heart," Lydia said softly, reading over the note. "Must run in the family." She looked up at him with such genuine warmth that Sam felt his cheeks flush. Sam ducked his head, but Lydia's words gave him strength he hadn't known he needed. They talked easily through the 30-minute lunch break, their conversation flowing like old friends catching up. She told him about the challenges of caring for her aging parents, the sleepless nights, the difficult decisions, the unexpected moments of joy. He found himself opening up about Anna's illness, sharing memories he rarely spoke aloud, how she'd insisted on helping Ellie with homework even during her worst days, how she'd made him promise to keep believing in better things. Throughout the week, more of Ellie's notes appeared in Sam's lunch bags like small miracles. "You can do hard things," written in bold blue letters, and "Remember to smile today," decorated with a drawing of the sun. Each one gave him an extra boost when the training felt overwhelming, when his fingers stumbled over the keyboard, when the technical jargon made his head spin. But it wasn't just Sam who was being touched by Ellie's kindness. Paper cranes started appearing around the office like colorful flowers blooming in unexpected places. On keyboards, between shifts, next to coffee makers in the break room, propped against computer monitors, tucked into coat pockets. Each one perfectly folded with the patience only a child possessed, each one bringing unexpected joy to its finder. The bright paper seemed to catch the light wherever it landed. "Found another one," called out Sarah from accounting, holding up a blue crane she'd discovered tucked behind her stapler. "These little things really brighten up the day. I wonder who's making them." Even the most stressed employees, the ones who usually rushed past Sam without a second glance, couldn't help but smile when they discovered one of Ellie's carefully crafted gifts. The office atmosphere began to shift almost imperceptibly, becoming warmer, more welcoming. People lingered a little longer in conversations, shared stories over coffee, laughed more easily. Kevin proved to be a patient teacher, breaking down complex procedures into manageable steps and never showing frustration when Sam needed something explained twice. "See? You're getting faster already," he encouraged as Sam successfully navigated through a complicated database query without help. "You've got a natural attention to detail that most people don't have." "Comes from years of making sure every corner was clean," Sam replied with a small smile, his confidence growing with each small success. "When you're responsible for a whole building, you learn to notice things others miss." Lydia became a steady presence in Sam's days, always ready with an encouraging word during coffee breaks or a sympathetic ear when he felt overwhelmed. During one particularly challenging afternoon, when error messages kept flashing on his screen no matter what he tried, she found him staring frustrated at the monitor. "Rome wasn't built in a day," she reminded him gently, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. And neither is a career change. You're doing just fine. Better than fine, actually. By Friday afternoon, Sam's head was swimming with new information, codes and procedures, file systems and protocols, but he felt genuine pride in his progress. The paper crane in his pocket had become a sort of talisman, its gentle weight reminding him of why he was pushing himself so hard. Every time doubt crept in, he'd touch it and remember Ellie's faith in him. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, with autumn sunlight streaming through their small apartment windows. Sam and Ellie walked hand in hand through the local farmer's market, their footsteps echoing on the brick walkways. The morning sun warmed their faces and the air smelled of fresh bread, roasted coffee, and ripe fruit from the various stalls. Vendors called out their prices in friendly voices, and families wandered between the booths with wicker baskets. "Can we get some apples, Dad?" Ellie asked, pointing to a display of shiny red fruit arranged in careful pyramids. The vendor, an elderly man with kind eyes, smiled and waved at them. "Sure can, sweetie." Sam selected a small bag of crisp apples, thinking how far they'd come from the days when even such a simple treat had to be carefully budgeted. He handed the vendor exact change, receiving a warm, "Have a beautiful day" in return. They walked home together along the tree-lined sidewalks, Ellie swinging the bag of apples while chattering about her plans to teach her friends at school how to make paper cranes. Her voice bubbled with excitement as she described the different colors she wanted to try next. Sam listened to every word, his heart full to overflowing. The morning felt like a gift. No pressure, no computer screens, just peaceful time with his daughter under the golden autumn sky. "Your cranes are making lots of people happy at work," he told her as they paused to watch a squirrel gathering acorns in the small park near their building. Ellie beamed up at him, her face bright with joy. "Really? I just wanted to help make your new job better. I thought maybe if people had something pretty to look at, they'd remember to be kind." "You make everything better, sweetheart," Sam said softly, squeezing her small hand in his larger one. "You always have." Her simple wisdom continued to amaze him, the way she saw solutions where adults saw only problems. Sam pulled into the company parking lot early Monday morning, his fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel. The morning dew still clung to his windshield as he gathered his courage and his briefcase, a modest but professional brown leather bag Grace had given him for his new role. Inside the glass-walled conference room, Sam settled into a chair alongside his project team members. Kevin, the young programmer who had become an unexpected ally, gave him an encouraging nod from across the table. The safety protocol proposal documents lay spread before them, covered in sticky notes and highlighter marks from their previous meetings. "All right, team," Sarah Chen, the project leader, began. "We need to finalize these safety protocols for Thursday's presentation. Let's go through each section carefully." As they reviewed the manufacturing floor layout, Sam's eyes kept returning to one particular diagram. Something about it nagged at him, tickling the back of his mind with years of careful observation. He'd walked those floors countless times during his night shifts, noting every crack, every potential hazard. "Excuse me," Sam spoke up, his voice quieter than he intended. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I noticed something about the loading zone near Station C." The room fell silent. Sarah raised her eyebrows expectantly. "Go on, Sam." Sam stood up and walked to the whiteboard, uncapping a marker with slightly trembling hands. "When I used to clean that area, I always had to be extra careful because of how the evening shift would stack the supply crates." He drew a quick sketch. "The current layout has them positioned here, but with the overhead ventilation system, there's significant condensation buildup during humid weather. I've seen multiple close calls with slipping." Kevin leaned forward, interested. "You're right. I never noticed that, but it makes perfect sense." "We could relocate the storage area here," Sam continued, adding to his diagram. "It's closer to the actual workstations and away from the condensation zone. Plus, it would reduce transit time for workers." Sarah's eyes lit up. "This is exactly the kind of practical insight we needed. Sam, would you be willing to lead this section of the presentation on Thursday?" Sam's heart jumped into his throat, but he nodded. "Yes, I can do that." Over the next few days, the team worked together to refine the proposal. Sam noticed a subtle but meaningful shift in how people treated him around the office. Where before he had been invisible or worse, now colleagues stopped to chat or ask his opinion. Several times he spotted Ellie's paper cranes perched on desks and monitors throughout the building, bringing unexpected smiles to stressed faces. On Wednesday afternoon, Sam found a crane on his own desk, this one made from bright yellow paper. A small note was folded beneath it. "You're doing great, Daddy. Love, Ellie." He carefully placed it next to his computer monitor, drawing strength from its presence. Thursday morning arrived with a mix of sunshine and nervous energy. Sam arrived early, wearing his best shirt freshly pressed the night before. He'd practiced his presentation portion countless times in front of his bathroom mirror, with Ellie serving as his patient audience. The senior committee filed into the conference room at exactly 10 a.m. Sam recognized several faces, including Daniel Ross, whose stern expression made his stomach tighten. Grace sat at the head of the table, her presence both intimidating and reassuring. Sarah opened the presentation smoothly, setting up their key points with practiced ease. When it was Sam's turn, he took a deep breath and stood. His hands shook slightly as he clicked to his slides, but his voice came out steady and clear. "During my years maintaining the manufacturing floor," he began, "I observed several safety concerns that this new protocol addresses." He walked them through his observations and solutions, his natural humility and practical experience shining through his words. The committee members leaned forward, engaged. Even Daniel Ross's expression softened slightly as Sam explained the potential cost savings of the relocated storage area. When Sam finished his section, spontaneous applause broke out around the table. "Excellent work," one committee member commented. "This is exactly the kind of ground-level insight we need." The rest of the presentation went smoothly, and when it concluded, the entire room buzzed with positive energy. As people began gathering their materials and filing out, Grace approached Sam quietly. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and said simply, "I'm proud of you, Sam." Those 5 words sent warmth spreading through his chest. He hadn't realized how much he'd needed to hear them until that moment. Sam walked out of the meeting room with his head high and his heart full, feeling truly confident for the first time in years. As he headed back to his desk, he passed by a window and caught his reflection. A man standing tall, his tie straight, his eyes bright with accomplishment. In his pocket, he could feel the small bump where Ellie's paper crane nestled safely, a reminder of how far he'd come and who he was doing it all for. The evening sun painted warm stripes across the sidewalk as Sam and Ellie walked to Jerry's ice cream shop on the corner. The small bell above the door chimed as they entered, and the sweet smell of waffle cones filled the air. Sam's tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, finally relaxed after his successful presentation. "2 vanilla cones, please," Sam said, pulling out his wallet. Ellie bounced on her toes beside him, her backpack still full of school papers and art supplies. "Make that 2 double scoops," he added with a wink at his daughter. "We're celebrating today." They carried their ice cream to a wooden bench outside, settling in to watch the sunset. Ellie's legs swung back and forth, not quite reaching the ground. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and passing cars created a quiet rhythm in the background. "Did they like your ideas, Daddy?" Ellie asked, careful not to let her ice cream drip. Sam nodded, dabbing at a vanilla streak on his chin with a napkin. "They did, sweetheart. They really did." He paused, watching a young family cross the street. "You know, things might be a little different for us soon. Good different. Like maybe we can get a bigger apartment?" Ellie's eyes sparkled with hope. "One where I can have my own art corner?" "Maybe," Sam said softly. "We'll see. But first, I need to keep working hard and learning everything I can." Back at Harrington Industries, Daniel Ross stood at his office window watching the parking lot empty for the day. His jaw clenched as he noticed yet another origami crane on someone's desk, one of dozens that had appeared throughout the building over the past week. The simple paper birds had become a symbol of the changing atmosphere in the office, and it made his blood boil. He'd overheard 2 senior managers praising Sam's presentation earlier that day. "Finally, someone who understands both the operational and practical sides," they'd said. "Fresh perspective." Daniel's knuckles whitened around his coffee mug. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Sam threw himself into his training with renewed confidence. During a morning session, he noticed Thomas, a younger trainee, struggling with some technical documentation. "Here," Sam said, pulling his chair closer. "I figured out a trick for this last week. If you organize the safety protocols by department first, then cross-reference them with the maintenance schedules, it makes more sense." Thomas's face brightened. "Thanks, Mr. Bishop. I was getting pretty frustrated." "Just Sam is fine," he smiled. "And trust me, I know how overwhelming it can feel at first." In the cafeteria, Lydia watched this exchange from behind the counter, a warm smile playing at her lips. When Sam came up to get his lunch, she made sure to give him an extra dinner roll. "That was kind of you," she said, nodding toward Thomas. helping him like that? Sam shrugged, his ears reddening slightly. Just passing along what others have taught me? You're too modest. Lydia tucked a strand of graying hair behind her ear. Some of us are getting together after work tomorrow for coffee at the Bean House. You should join us, if you'd like. Sam felt a flutter in his chest he hadn't experienced in years. I'd need to check with Mrs. Jensen about watching Ellie, but that would be nice. Later that afternoon, Sam passed Daniel in the hallway. The department head barely acknowledged him, but Sam noticed his cold stare. He chose to focus instead on the string of paper cranes hanging in the window of the break room, Ellie's latest contribution to office morale. Friday afternoon arrived with golden sunshine streaming through the windows. Sam packed up his desk, still amazed to have one, and headed out to pick up Ellie from school. She was waiting on the steps, her art folder bulging with new drawings. "Daddy!" She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I made you something." Sam took the carefully folded paper from her hands, another crane, but this one was different. It was made from bright blue paper and decorated with tiny silver stars. "It's beautiful," he said, carefully tucking it into his breast pocket. "Ready to head home?" They walked hand in hand down the familiar streets, past the ice cream shop, past the small park where Ellie liked to play. The setting sun turned the clouds pink and orange above them. Sam felt Ellie's small hand squeeze his, and he squeezed back gently. For the first time since Anna's passing, Sam felt truly hopeful. Not just the desperate hope that had kept him going through the hard years, but a real warm sense that things were genuinely improving. He thought about the training program, about Lydia's kind smile, about the respect he'd begun to earn at work. "Can we have spaghetti for dinner?" Ellie asked, skipping slightly beside him. "Of course we can," Sam replied, his heart full. The simple joy in her voice, the warmth of the evening, the weight lifted from his shoulders, it all came together in a moment of pure contentment. Life was finally turning upward, and he was ready to embrace whatever came next. Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window of Sam and Ellie's modest apartment. The gentle sizzle of pancakes on the griddle filled the small space with a warm, sweet aroma. Sam, still in his worn flannel pajamas, flipped a perfectly golden pancake while Ellie sat at their small kitchen table, carefully folding another paper crane. "These might be my best ones yet," Sam said, sliding 2 fluffy pancakes onto Ellie's plate. He'd made them in the shape of hearts, not perfect, but recognizable enough to make Ellie beam. "They look amazing, Daddy!" Ellie reached for the syrup, her eyes bright. "And guess what? Mrs. Rodriguez taught me how to make smaller cranes yesterday. I can fit them in people's pencil holders now." Sam chuckled, settling into his chair with his own plate. "You're spreading joy all over that building, sweetheart." He watched as she carefully cut into her pancake, savoring every bite. These quiet moments were precious. No pressure, no whispers, just father and daughter sharing breakfast. Meanwhile, across town in his luxurious home office, Daniel Ross sat hunched over his computer, his face illuminated by the screen's harsh glow. His fingers moved deliberately across the keyboard as he accessed the company's secure server. The safety protocol document Sam had presented, the one that had earned him so much praise, was open before him. "Let's see how well you do when your competence is questioned," Daniel muttered, methodically altering timestamps and access logs. He carefully embedded false data showing Sam had accessed restricted sections of the database without authorization. The changes were subtle but damning, exactly what he needed. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Sam straightened his tie in the elevator mirror, feeling optimistic despite the weekend being over. The security guard nodded respectfully as Sam passed through the lobby, a small gesture that still felt new and welcome. But something felt off when he reached his floor. Conversation stopped as he walked by. People avoided eye contact. Before he could reach his desk, Janet from HR appeared at his elbow. "Mr. Bishop, could you come with me, please? There's an urgent matter we need to discuss." Sam's stomach tightened as he followed her to a conference room. Inside, 3 stern-faced executives sat waiting, including Daniel Ross, who wore an expression of grave concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Please, sit down," Janet said, sliding a folder across the table. "We've discovered some serious irregularities in your access of confidential information." Sam's hands trembled slightly as he opened the folder. Pages of technical data and access logs stared back at him, showing timestamps and file permissions he knew he'd never accessed. This isn't right," Sam said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I followed every protocol exactly as I was trained." "The logs don't lie, Mr. Bishop," Daniel Ross interjected smoothly. "This is a serious security breach. You accessed restricted data without proper clearance." "But I didn't!" Sam's voice rose slightly, then he forced himself to calm down. "There must be some mistake." Janet's face showed genuine regret as she spoke. "I'm sorry, but we have to follow procedure. You're suspended pending a full investigation. Please clear your desk and turn in your access badge." The walk to his desk felt endless. Whispers followed him as he gathered his few personal items, a photo of Ellie, her lucky crane, a coffee mug she'd painted for him. Kevin watched from his cubicle, his brow furrowed in concern. As Sam packed, Kevin noticed something odd on his computer screen, a slight discrepancy in the file timestamps he'd been reviewing. He glanced at Sam's dejected figure, then back at his screen, wheels turning in his mind. The elevator ride down was torturous. Sam clutched his small box of belongings, mind racing. How would he tell Ellie? How would he pay the bills? The same security guard who had greeted him warmly that morning now avoided his gaze as he handed over his badge. Walking to Ellie's school, Sam's feet felt like lead. The spring day seemed to mock him with its brightness. When Ellie bounded out of the building, her smile faded as soon as she saw his face. "Daddy, what's wrong?" she asked, taking his hand. They passed a group of business people who glanced at Sam's box of belongings and whispered among themselves. Ellie's small hand tightened in his. "Daddy, are they laughing at you again?" Sam swallowed hard, blinking back tears as he looked down at his daughter's worried face. He forced his voice to stay steady as he squeezed her hand. "It will be okay, sweetheart." The evening stretched long and silent in Sam's small apartment. The only sound was the soft ticking of the wall clock and the occasional rustle of wind through the curtains. Sam sat at the kitchen table, his shoulders slumped under the weight of the day's events. The suspension letter lay crumpled before him, its official letterhead seeming to mock everything he'd worked for. He glanced toward Ellie's room, where she had finally fallen asleep after asking questions he couldn't quite answer. How could he explain to an 8-year-old that someone had made it look like he'd done something wrong? The thought of her confused face at dinner made his chest ache. The cheap overhead light cast harsh shadows across the worn tablecloth as Sam reached for his coffee mug, now cold and barely touched. His mind wandered to Grace's disappointed expression during the HR meeting. Though she'd remained professional, he'd seen the conflict in her eyes. She'd given him a chance, put her reputation on the line for him, and now this. "Maybe it's better if I just go back to cleaning," he whispered to the empty kitchen. "At least then I couldn't hurt anyone else's career." The thought of Grace facing questions about her judgment made him sick to his stomach. The night shift wasn't so bad, he tried to convince himself. He could still provide for Ellie, even if it meant giving up on bigger dreams. A gentle knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. Through the peephole, he saw Lydia standing there, holding what looked like a casserole dish. His first instinct was to pretend he wasn't home, to hide in his shame, but something in her expression made him open the door. "I heard what happened," Lydia said softly, stepping inside. She wore casual clothes instead of her usual work uniform, and her face showed genuine concern. "I brought dinner, or maybe breakfast for tomorrow since it's getting late." "You didn't have to do that," Sam mumbled, but moved to take the warm dish from her hands. "I wanted to." Lydia followed him to the kitchen, watching as he set the casserole on the counter. "And I wanted to make sure you weren't sitting here alone, convincing yourself to give up." Sam's silence confirmed her suspicion. "Sam Bishop," she said, pulling out a chair and sitting down firmly, "don't you dare think about quitting." "Lydia, you don't understand. The evidence they have is wrong," she interrupted. "Anyone who knows you knows that. Grace knows that." Sam sank back into his chair, running a hand through his graying hair. "Grace has done enough for me already. I can't ask her to keep fighting my battles." "She's already investigating," Lydia revealed, leaning forward. "I overheard her on the phone before I left work. She's not convinced by that report at all." Hope flickered briefly in Sam's chest, but he pushed it down. "Even if she finds something, the damage is done. People are already whispering again. Maybe they were right all along. Maybe I don't belong in that world." "Stop that right now!" Lydia's voice was gentle but firm. "You earned your place there. Remember what Ellie said about your presentation last week? How proud she was?" Sam's eyes drifted to Ellie's closed bedroom door. "She deserves better than a father who keeps failing." "Failed?" Lydia reached across the table and touched his hand. "Sam, you haven't failed at anything. You've raised an amazing daughter on your own. You've worked harder than anyone I know. And when you finally got a chance to prove yourself, you exceeded everyone's expectations." "Until now," he said bitterly. "This isn't over," Lydia insisted. She stood up and moved to the kitchen, opening cabinets until she found plates. "First, you're going to eat something. Then we're going to talk about how you're going to fight this." Sam watched as she served 2 portions of the casserole, the smell of home-cooked food filling the apartment. His stomach growled, reminding him he'd barely eaten all day. "Grace is smart," Lydia continued, setting a plate in front of him. "If something's wrong with that report, she'll find it. But she needs you to stay strong, to show everyone that you're not running away." Back in her office, Grace was indeed working late, her desk lamp casting a warm glow over spread papers. She compared the suspicious report to older documents, looking for inconsistencies. Something about the formatting bothered her, but she couldn't quite place it. Her instincts, honed over decades in business, told her this wasn't right. In Sam's apartment, the casserole slowly disappeared as Lydia kept him talking, sharing stories about her own setbacks and victories. Her presence made the kitchen feel warmer somehow, less lonely. When she finally stood to leave, the clock showed it was nearly midnight. "Promise me you won't make any decisions tonight," she said at the door. "Give Grace time to work. Give yourself time to think." After she left, Sam returned to the kitchen table. He picked up Ellie's paper crane, the one she'd made him for good luck. Its delicate wings caught the light, casting tiny shadows on the table's surface. He turned it over and over in his hands, remembering how proud she'd looked when she gave it to him. The apartment felt heavy with possibilities and fears as Sam sat there, staring at the crane, searching for answers in its carefully folded wings. The night stretched on, and still he sat, holding on to hope as tightly as he held the small paper bird. The next morning dawned gray and chilly, with low clouds hanging over the city like a heavy blanket. Grace Harrington stood at her office window on the 32nd floor, watching early workers file into the building below like tiny figures in a snow globe. Her usually calm demeanor was tinged with concern as she observed the familiar rhythm of corporate life beginning another day. The weight of yesterday's revelations pressed against her chest, making her normally steady hands tremble slightly as she reached for her phone. She typed a brief message to Kevin Lee. "Please see me in my office. Urgent." Her finger hesitated over the send button for just a moment before she pressed it decisively. Whatever was happening to Sam Bishop needed to be resolved quickly, and Kevin might hold the key. Kevin arrived minutes later, his sneakers squeaking softly against the polished marble floor. He fidgeted nervously with his laptop bag, adjusting the strap multiple times as he approached Grace's assistant desk. Grace's office felt completely different in the early morning light, more intimate, less intimidating than during regular business hours. The usual polish of corporate authority was softened by worry lines around her eyes, and the gentle way she gestured him inside. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across her mahogany desk and making the room feel almost cozy despite its impressive size. "Kevin," Grace said gently, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing her desk, "I need your help with something important. Have you noticed anything unusual about the safety protocol documents lately? Anything at all that seemed off or strange?" Kevin swallowed hard, his conscience weighing heavily on his shoulders like a lead blanket. The memory of his past mockery of Sam made his cheeks burn with shame, but he knew this was his chance to make things right. "Actually, yes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The timestamps on some files seemed really weird when I was backing up the system yesterday evening. I didn't want to say anything without solid proof, but..." He paused, fumbling with the zipper of his laptop bag with shaking fingers. "The metadata shows multiple late-night access points that don't match our normal patterns." Grace leaned forward in her chair, her reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose, catching the morning light. Her expression grew more serious with each word Kevin spoke. "Show me everything," she said firmly. "Every detail, no matter how small it might seem." Over the next 2 days, Kevin barely left his desk except for hurried coffee runs and quick trips to the restroom. His workspace became a fortress of determination, surrounded by empty energy drink cans and crumpled snack wrappers. Lines of green code scrolled endlessly across his multiple monitors as he dug deeper into the company's vast digital archives, following electronic trails like a detective pursuing clues. Each new discovery made his stomach churn with a mixture of excitement and disgust. The altered documents had Daniel Ross's digital fingerprints smeared all over them, specific login times that didn't match his supposed schedule, unusual access patterns that violated standard company protocols, and modified timestamps that had been clumsily changed to hide the truth. Other programmers in the department began to whisper among themselves, shooting curious glances at Kevin's increasingly frantic work pace, but he remained focused, driven by a burning need to uncover the complete truth and clear Sam's name. In Sam's modest apartment across town, golden sunshine streamed through the small kitchen window, creating warm patches of light on the worn linoleum floor. He sat at their tiny wooden table with Ellie, helping her with an elaborate art project that had taken over most of their living space. Paint bottles of every color imaginable and sheets of colored paper covered every available surface, while soft classical music played from a scratched portable radio they'd picked up at a garage sale years ago. "Can you help me cut this star shape, Daddy?" Ellie asked sweetly, holding up a piece of shimmering golden paper that caught the sunlight like real gold. Her small fingers struggled with the intricate pattern she'd drawn. Sam managed a genuine smile, though his eyes remained clouded with worry about his uncertain future at the company. "Of course, sweetheart," he replied, taking the safety scissors from her paint-stained hands. He carefully traced the delicate pattern she'd created and began cutting with the patience and precision that came naturally to him, grateful for any distraction from the heavy thoughts that had kept him awake most of the night. Ellie worked quietly beside him for several minutes, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration as she painted careful details on another piece of her project. Then she looked up at him with those perceptive eyes that seemed far too wise for her 8 years. "Are you sad because of the trouble at work?" she asked softly. Sam's hand stilled completely on the scissors, and he felt his heart squeeze painfully in his chest. "A little bit," he admitted honestly, unable to lie to his daughter's innocent question. "But making beautiful art with you always makes me happy, no matter what else is happening." Meanwhile, across the city, Grace methodically built her case like a skilled attorney preparing for the most important trial of her career. She called private meetings with various department heads throughout both days, reviewing standard operating procedures in minute detail and gathering sworn statements about document handling protocols from anyone who might have relevant information. Each conversation revealed more glaring inconsistencies in Daniel's carefully constructed story, and the web of deception became increasingly clear. In her spacious office, she spread out printed emails, procedure logs, and timeline charts across every inch of her mahogany desk. The evidence was mounting like pieces of a complex puzzle finally coming together. Timestamps that didn't align with known schedules, security access codes used during hours when the building was supposed to be empty, and multiple versions of the same critical document containing subtle but vitally important changes that only someone with administrative access could have made. "Miss Harrington," her assistant Sarah's voice came through the intercom system. "Legal is here with those confidentiality agreements you requested this morning." Grace straightened her navy blue blazer and smoothed down her hair before opening her office door with steady hands. "Thank you, Sarah. Please send them in immediately." The legal team's thorough review confirmed her growing suspicions beyond any reasonable doubt. The altered documents violated multiple company policies regarding information security and data integrity. More importantly for Sam's situation, the digital evidence proved conclusively that he couldn't have accessed those particular files during any of the times in question, since his security badge had been scanned entering and leaving the building at completely different hours. Back at his cluttered workspace, Kevin's fingers flew across his keyboard with increasing urgency as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Lines of complex code revealed an unmistakable pattern of deliberate and systematic file manipulation that could only have been done by someone with high-level administrative access. Coffee cups accumulated on his desk like soldiers in formation as hours blurred together into a continuous stream of focused investigation. Other programmers gave him increasingly curious looks as they passed by, but he barely noticed their attention, his entire being focused on the critical task at hand. Late that evening, when most employees had long since gone home to their families, Kevin's computer finally pinged with a decisive verification sound. His hands shook uncontrollably as he gathered all his findings into a comprehensive digital folder, organizing screenshots, metadata reports, and access logs into an undeniable timeline of deception. The evidence was absolutely overwhelming. Daniel Ross had methodically and deliberately altered timestamps, changed access logs, and modified critical safety documents in a calculated effort to frame Sam for negligence he never committed. The hallways were eerily quiet and nearly empty as Kevin rushed toward the executive floor, his sneakers squeaking against the polished floors and his footsteps echoing loudly in the stillness. His heart pounded in his chest as he rode the elevator up, clutching his laptop like a precious treasure. Light still spilled from under Grace's office door like a beacon of hope. She was waiting for him, just as she'd promised. "Miss Harrington," Kevin burst through the door, slightly out of breath from his hurried journey and the weight of what he'd discovered. He placed his laptop carefully on her polished desk and pulled up the most damning evidence with trembling fingers. "Look at these access logs," he said, his voice gaining strength as he pointed to the screen. "The timestamps here, here, and here. They've all been manually changed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And these file modifications, every single one of them traces directly back to Mr. Ross's personal security credentials." Grace studied the computer screen with intense concentration, her expression hardening with each piece of evidence Kevin showed her. She scrolled through page after page of irrefutable digital proof, her jaw tightening as the full scope of Daniel's betrayal became crystal clear. Finally, she sat back slowly in her leather chair and fixed Kevin with a look of steely determination that seemed to fill the entire room with purpose. "We confront him first thing tomorrow morning," she said firmly. Sam Bishop sat on a hard plastic chair outside the executive boardroom, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The morning sunlight streamed through nearby windows, casting long shadows across the carpeted hallway. His borrowed suit jacket felt stiff and uncomfortable, a constant reminder that he didn't quite belong in this part of the building. Through the thick wooden door, he could hear muffled voices rising and falling. His heart thumped painfully in his chest with each passing minute. He reached into his pocket and touched the worn paper crane Ellie had made him, drawing comfort from its familiar creases. Inside the boardroom, Grace Harrington stood at the head of a long mahogany table, her presence commanding attention from the assembled executives. The morning light caught the silver in her hair as she gestured to the screen behind her, where Kevin's evidence was displayed in stark detail. "The metadata doesn't lie," Grace said firmly, her voice steady but tinged with disappointment. "These files were accessed and altered late at night, long after normal business hours. The digital signatures are clear." Daniel Ross sat rigid in his chair, his face a mask of practiced indignation. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, straightening his expensive tie. "Anyone could have accessed those files. You can't prove it was me." Kevin, sitting nervously at the far end of the table, cleared his throat. "Actually, sir, we can." He tapped a few keys on his laptop, and new information appeared on the screen. "The system logs show the files were accessed using your personal credentials. The changes were made from your office computer, and the security cameras confirm you were in the building at those exact times." Daniel's face flushed red. "You had no right to access those security logs?" "I authorized it," Grace cut in sharply, "just as I authorized the full investigation into this matter." She turned to address the other executives, her expression grave. "We have clear evidence that Mr. Ross deliberately falsified documents to frame Sam Bishop, a dedicated employee who has shown nothing but integrity since joining our company." The other executives exchanged glances, their disapproval evident. Martha Chen, the head of human resources, spoke up first. "This is a serious breach of ethics, Daniel. We can't overlook this kind of behavior." "It's more than that," Thomas Weber from legal added, adjusting his glasses. "It's potentially criminal. Falsifying company documents, attempting to destroy someone's career." He shook his head. "This goes against everything we stand for." Daniel's composure cracked. "He's just a janitor," he burst out, his voice sharp with contempt. "You're all acting like he's some sort of hero, but he's nothing. He should know his place." A heavy silence fell over the room. Grace's expression hardened, her disappointment giving way to anger. That just a janitor served his country with honor, raised a daughter alone after losing his wife, and has shown more integrity in his short time here than you have in your entire career, Daniel. She turned to the group. "I move to remove Daniel Ross from his position, effective immediately, and begin disciplinary proceedings. All in favor?" Hands rose around the table without hesitation. Daniel stared in disbelief as his colleagues unanimously voted for his removal. "This is absurd," he sputtered, rising from his chair. "You can't do this to me. I've given 15 years to this company." "And in 15 minutes, you destroyed any goodwill you might have earned," Grace replied coldly. "Security will escort you to clear out your office. Legal will be in touch regarding the terms of your departure." As two security officers entered the room, Daniel's face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this," he spat, but his threats fell flat in the face of Grace's unwavering stare. After Daniel was let out, Grace took a deep breath and smoothed her jacket. "Kevin," she said softly, "please ask Sam to join us." Kevin hurried to the door and opened it. Sam looked up, his face pale with anxiety. "They'd like to see you now," Kevin said kindly, offering an encouraging smile. Sam stood slowly, his legs feeling unsteady. He straightened his borrowed jacket and touched the paper crane in his pocket one last time for luck. As he walked toward the boardroom door, he could see Grace standing at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. The other executives turned to watch him enter, and Sam felt the weight of their gazes as he stepped into the room that would determine his future. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Grace drew herself up, preparing to share the truth that would change everything. The morning sun continued to stream through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny stars, witnesses to this moment of revelation. The boardroom fell silent as Sam entered, the heavy oak doors closing behind him with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the vast space. 12 pairs of eyes turned to study him with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern, and he unconsciously smoothed his borrowed jacket, the same navy blazer Kevin had lent him days ago that still felt foreign against his skin. Grace Harrington stood at the head of the long mahogany table, her silver hair catching the morning light that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Her expression was warm, but serious, the kind of look that suggested important news was coming. "Please join me, Sam," Grace said, her voice cutting through the tension as she gestured for him to come forward with a gentle motion of her hand. Sam's footsteps seemed too loud on the polished marble floor as he made his way toward her, each step echoing in the silence. His worn work boots, the only shoes he owned, felt out of place on the expensive flooring. He noticed Daniel Ross's chair was conspicuously empty at the far end of the table, the high-backed leather seat turned slightly away from the group, but he didn't understand why the department head wasn't present for what he'd been told was an important meeting about his case. "Mr. Bishop," Grace began formally, her hands clasped in front of her, then her tone softened as she met his eyes. "Sam, we owe you a profound apology." Sam blinked in surprise, his breath catching slightly. His hands, which had been fidgeting nervously at his sides, went still as the words sank in. Around the table, he noticed several board members nodding gravely. "The accusations against you were completely false," Grace continued, her voice carrying the weight of authority and regret. "We have clear, irrefutable evidence that the documents in question were deliberately altered to frame you for misconduct you never committed. You are completely innocent of any wrongdoing, and we know exactly who was responsible for this terrible injustice." The tension that had lived in Sam's shoulders for what felt like an eternity began to ease, but confusion creased his brow as he tried to process what he was hearing. After days of uncertainty and fear, the news seemed almost too good to be true. "I don't understand," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who would do something like that? Why would anyone want to hurt me?" "Daniel Ross orchestrated this entire attempt to discredit you," Grace explained, her voice carrying a sharp edge of disappointment and barely contained anger. "He manipulated files, falsified reports, and abused his position of authority to destroy your reputation. As of this morning, he has been terminated and removed from his position, effective immediately." Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table like a wave. Several board members shook their heads in disgust. Kevin, who sat near the far end of the polished surface, gave Sam an encouraging nod, his young face filled with relief and solidarity. "Furthermore," Grace continued, pulling herself to her full height, "I am personally ordering human resources to completely clear your personnel record of any reference to these false allegations. Your suspension is lifted immediately, and you will be reinstated to the management training program without delay." She turned to address the room, her gaze sweeping over each face. "I expect everyone in this company to support Mr. Bishop's transition and treat him with the respect he deserves. He has proven himself more than capable in every way, and more importantly, he has shown exceptional character and grace throughout this terrible ordeal." Sam's throat felt tight with emotion he couldn't quite name. Relief, gratitude, and something that might have been hope all swirled together inside his chest. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice thick. I don't know what else to say. I never expected—" "You don't need to say anything," Grace assured him, her expression softening with maternal warmth. She reached into her leather briefcase and pulled out a manila folder, setting it on the table between them. In fact, I have something else important to discuss with you. We've been reviewing the organization structure and identifying areas where we need stronger leadership, and I've approved the creation of a new position, Assistant Facilities Manager. Given your unique experience, your demonstrated leadership abilities, and your intimate knowledge of how this building operates, I believe you would be perfect for this role once you complete your management training. Sam's eyes widened as the full meaning of her words hit him. The position would mean regular daytime hours, a substantial increase in pay, and most importantly, the kind of stability that would give Ellie the secure future he'd always dreamed of providing. His hands trembled slightly as he imagined telling his daughter that their worries were finally over. The news spread through the building like wildfire carried on the wind. As Sam left the boardroom 20 minutes later, people emerged from their offices and cubicles like flowers opening to the sun. The same hallways that had once felt hostile and unwelcoming now buzzed with genuine concern and support. Many approached him with heartfelt apologies for their past behavior, their faces showing the shame and regret that came with recognizing their own cruelty. "I'm so sorry for how we treated you," Morgan said, her voice breaking slightly as she looked genuinely ashamed. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd lost sleep over her actions. "We were so wrong about everything. About you." Caleb and Vince stood beside her like chastened schoolboys, their usual swagger completely gone. They shuffled their feet and couldn't meet Sam's eyes as they mumbled their own apologies, the weight of their behavior finally catching up with them. "I appreciate that," Sam replied quietly, his voice steady and kind as he chose grace over grudges. "We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." Lydia appeared from the direction of the cafeteria, practically glowing with joy. Her face was beaming as she approached, and without hesitation, she reached out to squeeze his arm gently. "I knew you'd pull through this," she said warmly. "I never doubted you for a second. You're too good a man for this kind of thing to keep you down." Kevin caught up with him near the elevator bank, slightly out of breath from hurrying across the building. His young face was serious but proud as he explained, "I helped trace the digital evidence that proved your innocence. I spent hours going through server logs and file histories. I couldn't let them do that to you, not after everything you've done to help people around here." Sam felt overwhelmed by the support surrounding him, such a stark contrast to the isolation and invisibility he'd known during his years as a janitor. The genuine care in their faces was almost too much to process after so much loneliness. "Thank you," he said sincerely, his voice catching with emotion. "All of you. I don't know how to repay this kindness." Grace approached him one final time before he prepared to leave for the day, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. "Sam," she said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, "go home early today. Spend some quality time with Ellie. You've more than earned it, and I imagine she's been worried about her father." Sam nodded gratefully, thinking of his daughter waiting at the after-school program, probably wondering why he'd seemed so stressed lately despite his attempts to hide it. He gathered his few belongings from the temporary locker he'd been assigned and headed for the building's main entrance, his mind already racing ahead to Ellie's face when he would tell her that their struggles were finally over. As he pushed through the heavy glass doors, the afternoon sunlight wrapped around him like a warm embrace from an old friend. He stood there for a long moment on the concrete steps, letting the relief wash over him in waves, breathing deeply for what felt like the first time in days. The air tasted sweeter somehow, filled with possibility instead of fear. In his pocket, his fingers brushed against one of Ellie's delicate paper cranes, the one she'd tucked into his lunch that morning with a note telling him to stay strong. He smiled, thinking of how far they'd traveled together through hardship and uncertainty, and how much brighter their future suddenly looked stretching out before them. The crushing weight of worry that had pressed down on his shoulders for so long began to lift in the warm afternoon light, replaced by something he'd almost forgotten how to feel: hope. Sam waited outside Ellie's school, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The afternoon sun warmed his face as children streamed out of the building. When Ellie appeared, her backpack bouncing with each step, he couldn't hold back his smile. "Daddy," she called out, running to him. "You're early today." Sam scooped her up in a tight hug. "I have some good news, sweetheart. Want to hear it at the park?" Ellie's eyes lit up. "The one with the blue slide?" "That's the one." They walked hand in hand to the small neighborhood park 3 blocks away. The familiar creaking of the swings and children's laughter filled the air. Ellie climbed onto a bench and Sam sat beside her. Remember how I was worried about work? Sam began. Ellie nodded solemnly. Because of the mean people? Well, Mrs. Harrington figured out what really happened. The person who tried to get me in trouble is gone now, and I get to go back to my training program. Really? Ellie bounced on the bench. So, you don't have to be sad anymore? Sam's throat tightened with emotion. That's right, honey. No more being sad. Now go play. I can see you eyeing that slide. As Ellie raced off to join the other children, Sam watched her with pride. Her laughter echoed across the playground as she made new friends, sharing the slide and showing them how to make simple origami shapes with leaves she found. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sam threw himself back into training with renewed energy. The computer systems that had once seemed so foreign began to make sense, especially with Kevin's patient guidance. Other employees who had once ignored him now stopped to chat in the hallways, genuine warmth replacing their former indifference. Lunch became Sam's favorite part of the day. Lydia would join him in the cafeteria, bringing her homemade sweet tea and always saving him a piece of whatever dessert was featured that day. You're looking more confident, Lydia noted one afternoon, sliding a slice of apple pie across the table. The training suits you. Sam ducked his head, pleased. It's getting easier, though I still can't believe how much has changed. I can, Lydia said softly. You've always had this in you, Sam. You just needed someone to notice. Their conversations flowed easily, ranging from childhood memories to favorite books to their shared love of old movies. Sam found himself opening up about Anna for the first time in years, sharing funny stories that made them both laugh instead of just remembering the sadness. Grace took an active role in Sam's development, scheduling weekly meetings to discuss his progress. She taught him about delegation, conflict resolution, and the importance of maintaining dignity while exercising authority. Leadership isn't about power, Sam, she explained during one session. It's about service. You already understand that better than most. Sam absorbed every lesson, taking careful notes in a small notebook Ellie had decorated with stickers. At home, he would review the day's teachings while she did her homework at the kitchen table, both of them working toward their goals together. The other trainees began coming to Sam for advice, especially regarding safety protocols and facility operations. His years of hands-on experience gave him insights that no amount of theoretical training could match. Even some of the senior staff started consulting him about practical improvements to workplace efficiency. One morning, Sam arrived to find his desk covered in paper cranes, dozens of them in every color imaginable. A card propped against his computer monitor read, "Thank you for making our workplace better. Your Harrington Industries family." He later learned that Ellie had taught several employees how to make the cranes during her visits, and they had spread the practice throughout the company. The simple paper birds had become a symbol of support and encouragement, appearing on desks when someone was having a tough day or celebrating a success. As the training program neared its end, Sam's confidence grew steadily. He could now navigate complex management scenarios with ease, drawing on both his formal training and his natural empathy. Grace's mentoring had helped him find his voice, while Lydia's friendship had given him the courage to use it. The evening before his graduation ceremony, Sam sat at his small kitchen table reviewing his final presentation. Ellie worked quietly beside him, her tongue poking out in concentration as she folded another piece of paper. "Done," she announced triumphantly, holding up a perfectly crafted crane. "This one's special, Daddy. It's for tomorrow." Sam watched as she carefully attached a piece of tape to the crane's wing and secured it to his briefcase. The paper bird seemed to glow in the warm kitchen light, its wings spread wide as if ready to take flight. "Do you think Mrs. Harrington will like my crane?" Ellie asked. "I'm sure she will, sweetheart." Sam reached over to smooth her hair. "She likes all your cranes." "And Miss Lydia, too?" Sam smiled, thinking of Lydia's kind eyes and gentle encouragement. "Yes, Miss Lydia, too." Ellie nodded, satisfied. "Good, because they made you happy again, Daddy, like the cranes do." Sam pulled his daughter into a tight hug, marveling at her wisdom. She was right. The simple paper birds had become more than just origami. They represented hope, kindness, and the power of small gestures to change lives. Looking at the crane on his briefcase, Sam felt ready for tomorrow's ceremony. He had come so far from those lonely nights pushing a mop cart, but he hadn't made the journey alone. Grace's belief in him, Lydia's steadfast support, and most importantly, Ellie's unwavering love had lifted him higher than he'd ever thought possible. He touched the crane gently, its paper wings soft under his fingers. Tomorrow would mark a new beginning, but tonight, in this moment with his daughter, Sam was exactly where he needed to be. Sam stood in front of his bedroom mirror early the next morning, carefully adjusting his blue tie. His fingers trembled slightly as he smoothed down his freshly pressed white shirt, the nicest one he owned. From the kitchen, he could hear Ellie humming as she finished her breakfast. "Almost ready, sweetheart?" he called out. "Just putting my shoes on," Ellie's voice rang back cheerfully. She appeared in his doorway a moment later, wearing her favorite yellow dress with white flowers. Her dark hair was neatly braided, and she clutched a small paper crane in her hands. "You look beautiful," Sam said softly, thinking how much she resembled her mother. "And you look handsome, Daddy." Ellie stepped forward to straighten his tie, her small face serious with concentration. "There. Perfect." They arrived at Harrington Industries 30 minutes early. The auditorium was already filling with people. Executives in expensive suits, IT professionals, administrative staff, and even some of the cleaning crew Sam had worked alongside for so many years. His heart warmed when he saw Mrs. Martinez, who had often shared her homemade tamales with him during late shifts, sitting near the back. Kevin spotted them immediately and waved them over. "Hey, Sam! Big day!" He gave Ellie a high five. "And look at you, Miss Ellie! You're the best-dressed person here!" Ellie grinned and handed him one of her paper cranes. "For good luck," she explained seriously. More people approached to wish Sam well. Faces that had once looked past him now smiled warmly. Even Caleb, Morgan, and Vince stood awkwardly nearby until Caleb finally stepped forward. We wanted to say congratulations," he mumbled, looking genuinely contrite. "And we're sorry for everything before." Sam nodded, accepting their words with the same quiet dignity he'd shown when they'd mocked him. "Thank you," he said simply. The lights dimmed slightly, signaling everyone to take their seats. Sam's breath caught when he saw Lydia entering, wearing a lovely green dress that made her eyes sparkle. She caught his gaze and smiled, making her way to the front row. Grace Harrington stepped onto the stage, commanding immediate attention. Her silver hair gleamed under the lights, and her presence filled the room with warmth and authority. "Today," she began, her voice clear and strong, "we celebrate not just the completion of a training program, but the triumph of the human spirit." She paused, her eyes finding Sam in the audience. True greatness isn't always found in corner offices or boardrooms. Sometimes it's found in quiet dedication, in unwavering integrity, in the person who shows up every day to do their best without seeking recognition. Sam felt Ellie's small hand slip into his as Grace continued. "In my years leading this company, I've learned that titles don't make leaders, character does. And sometimes, the most remarkable leadership qualities are hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice." Grace's voice grew warmer. "Sam Bishop exemplified these qualities long before we recognized them. He taught us all about dignity, perseverance, and the power of kindness." The audience listened intently as Grace shared stories of Sam's impact, from his military service to his years of dedicated work at Harrington Industries. She spoke of his innovative safety protocols, his natural ability to unite people, and his humble approach to leadership. "Sam," Grace called out, "would you please join me on stage?" Sam squeezed Ellie's hand once before standing. His legs felt surprisingly steady as he walked up the steps to the stage. Under the bright lights, he could see hundreds of faces looking back at him, faces that now held respect, admiration, and genuine warmth. "It gives me great pleasure," Grace announced, "to present Sam Bishop with his leadership certification with honors." She handed him an elegant folder, then turned back to the microphone. "Furthermore, I am thrilled to officially announce his promotion to Assistant Facilities Manager, effective immediately." The applause started slowly, then built into a thunderous standing ovation. Kevin's enthusiastic whoops could be heard above the crowd. From the front row, Lydia's eyes shone with pride, and something more, something that made Sam's heart skip a beat. But it was Ellie's face that moved him most. His daughter was beaming, standing on her chair to clap as hard as she could, pure joy radiating from her expression. After the ceremony, well-wishers surrounded Sam. Grace pulled him aside briefly, her hand warm on his shoulder. "This is just the beginning, Sam," she said quietly. "I see Director of Operations in your future. You have everything it takes." Sam felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you, Grace, for believing in me when nobody else did." "You proved yourself long before I noticed," she replied kindly. I just helped others see what was already there. As the crowd began to disperse, Lydia approached with Ellie. So, Lydia said, her smile lighting up her whole face, I hear there might be a celebration dinner in order? Please say yes, Daddy, Ellie bounced excitedly. Can we go to Pietro's? Sam looked at Lydia, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. I can't think of anyone I'd rather celebrate with, he said softly. The small Italian restaurant was cozy and welcoming. Over plates of pasta and warm bread, they talked and laughed. Ellie regaled them with stories from school, while Lydia shared funny cafeteria incidents. Sam found himself relaxing completely, enjoying the simple pleasure of good company and shared joy. As the evening drew to a close, they stepped out into the golden sunset. The air was warm and sweet with the promise of summer. Ellie skipped ahead a few steps, then ran back to grab Sam's hand. Lydia walked close beside them, her shoulder occasionally brushing against Sam's in a way that felt perfectly natural. The sky painted itself in brilliant oranges and pinks as they made their way home. Sam felt the weight of his new certification in his briefcase, but it wasn't nearly as heavy as the gratitude in his heart. For the first time since Anna's passing, he felt truly, deeply hopeful. The future stretched out before him, not as a burden to be carried, but as a path filled with promise. Ellie's hand was warm in his. Lydia's presence was steady beside him, and the setting sun painted their way forward in golden light. After so many years of uncertainty and struggle, Sam finally felt secure in his place in the world, ready to embrace whatever brightness tomorrow might bring. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Sam Bishop, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.